All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So once again, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions at Exostar, and thanks for joining me today for From Onboarding to Optimization, streamlining supplier lifecycle management. Before I dive into the formal presentation and demonstration, just let me cover a few details. Today's webinar is scheduled to last 30 minutes. Now, that does include Q&A. Now, you're going to be muted during today's presentation, but you can submit questions via chat during any time during the presentation. I'll go take a look at the chat just as I wrap up, and I'll answer any questions that came in. Now, if one of those questions is, will I be receiving the slide presentation? The answer is yes. As a follow-up for today's session, we'll send you a link to today's recording, as well as a copy of today's slides. If for some reason we do have an outage, and we haven't had one yet, but just in case, just wait for a minute and try to reconnect. You can do that in a couple of different ways. You can either just refresh your screen, or you can go back to the email you received prior to today's session, click on that link, and come back into today's session. Now, if after today's presentation you'd like to speak with one of our supply chain experts, or if you have any additional questions of Exostar, you can reach out to us a couple of different ways. You can email us at supplychain, all one word, at exostar.com, or you can come to the Exostar website, www.exostar.com. There is a forms page there there's a forms feature on every web page. You can click on that and submit any questions via that manner as well, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So with that, let's dive into today's presentation. So what we're going to talk about today is really kind of that first step in managing your overall supply chain. It's about gathering information from your suppliers, that information from them that you need to make sure they're compliant with your requirements and ensure that they maintain that compliance throughout. Now, what we're going to discuss today is particularly about cybersecurity cybersecurity compliance, and how that affects those groups that work with the Department of Defense or who are subcontractors to those that do. And what we want to make sure is that we don't disrupt our own supply chain because there are problems in that compliance. And how do we keep abreast of any changes that occur within and across our supply chain? Now, in the aerospace and defense field, we're always talking about a multi-tier supply chain. Now, you may be really anywhere along that supply chain. Now, you may be a prime contractor yourself to the Department of Defense, or you may be a subcontractor to somebody that is, or obviously you may be a subcontractor to a subcontractor that is. So within that supply chain, there are various requirements and needs that you have. You need to ensure that those you work with are trustworthy and that they meet the requirements that are part of the Department of Defense. We need a way to collaborate with those securely, understand where we are in that transaction flow, and ensure that we're compliant with all the various requirements around that. And that's what we're really going to talk about today. Now, how do we automate that process? How do we ensure that it happens as smoothly as possible? So when we're talking about supplier compliance in the Department of Defense or the aerospace and defense industry, what we're often talking about are how do we flow down requirements that we're receiving because we're part of or we've signed a contract with the Department of Defense. Those contracts have DFARs and FAR clauses. Those are federal acquisition regulations and defense federal acquisition regulations, which are part of every standard contract, and that have requirements that we flow down those same requirements that we have to those who we subcontract with and that they continue that flow down process. So we're ensuring, and this has been in the news quite a bit lately, oftentimes this centers around the control and safeguarding of controlled unclassified information within and across organizations. Now, that controlled unclassified information has to be safeguarded in accordance with a federal standard, NIST 800-171. There's a new requirement that's going to be starting fairly soon. It'll start to appear in contract language as soon as November 10th of this year. That requires these flow down clauses to be a part of, that if you receive this information, that controlled unclassified information, you protect it in accordance with NIST 800-171, and that once every 3 years, you have a third party assess your compliance with those 110 controls, and they validate that you do those things. Now, the award eligibility and the ability to obviously sign and accept contracts is going to be pursuant to those particular clauses. So how do we set up a supply chain risk management policy, practice, etc., where we have a plan for managing those supply chain cybersecurity risks? How do we ensure that this plan is well documented and implemented? And the best way to do that, and many of us are probably doing this today manually, is can we automate this process and use an application or tool that allows us to do this more efficiently and obviously get those warnings when things are out of compliance? So Exostar is uniquely positioned to assist you in this activity. We've been around for about 25 years now, working with some of the largest prime contractors in the aerospace and defense market. Many of you today may have filled out one of our compliance forms that was sent to you from one of these contractors. Now, this is being sent across the Exostar network utilizing an application that I'll show you when I demonstrate today called Exostar Supplier Management. This supplier management is gathering that compliance information for the Exostar customers and allowing them to share that information with others. So for example, if you filled out a form that was sent to you from HII, one of the customers that use this, if you filled out this CCRA form, Cybersecurity Risk Assessment form for HII, and say, for example, RTX sends you that same kind of form. So if you filled it out for HII, you'll get a pre-populated form sent to you from one of the other providers. All you'll have to do is verify that your information is the same, and then you can submit that form to continue on in that supplier onboarding process. Now, this ability to share that information is what makes the Exostar network unique across the aerospace and defense. That ability to use, for example, your credentials to get to the various supply chain portals is the same information, if you will, that we enable to be for you to share to others in the information, but you get to choose what and when you share that information. You can leverage that not only in getting access to the other applications that you need to do business, but as I mentioned before, you can use that same information to ease your onboarding process with the other suppliers to allow you to leverage what you've done for one organization with others across the defense field as well. So the way this plugs into the overall Exostar platform. Many of you use the Exostar platform today to interact with and work with a number of applications that you're utilizing to, for example, do PO collaboration. You go to one of the supply chain portals for example, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, UK MOD, etc., that Exostar is providing credentials to. You then leverage those same credentials to get to somebody else's. You also use those credentials to possibly get into applications that they're managing around quality management or around collaboration. So in all of those things, you're using Exostar's managed access gateway. That's Exostar's secure access and master data system. That's the thing that's gathering together the information about your organization at kind of that base level. Here's the name, the address, DUNS number, our unique IDs. Here are the users of our system, etc. All of that becomes part of the master data of your organization that can be obviously integrated with and shared with those other providers in the system. But again, you get to choose whether or not you share that. Now, when you join the Exostar network, your organization is first vetted and always vetted on whether or not your organization is assured that you're not on a denied parties list. If you want to go another layer deeper, you can subscribe to Exostar supplier management application. And this allows you to gather additional information from those suppliers. This would then allow you to determine whether or not, A, do they meet our minimum requirements to work with, or maybe they meet it for some contracts, but not others. So I can get insight into that. Now for this, Exostar uses some standard industry forms. These forms are contained there within the supplier management module. These forms are a NIST 800-171 form, which gathers whether or not you've implemented the 110 controls, which ones you haven't, etc. There's also a form that we worked on collaboratively with a national association, the National Defense. I forget what the ISAC stands for, but it's ND-ISAC. And that cybersecurity risk assessment form is another one that's contained there within the module. That asks some of those same questions, but it expands upon your overall cybersecurity posture. There's also a conflict minerals form and really a basic intake form. All of that information is also fed into Exostar's master data. Now, what that means is that if somebody else in the Exostar community is also subscribed to this, and they send you that same form, it's going to come pre-populated with the information you already provided. You're going to update that information or just verify that it's still valid. Submit that form back to that buying organization that gave it to you, and they then will determine your cybersecurity posture and what kind of relationship they can have with your organization. And you can leverage this as many times as necessary with others in there. This would then grant you access to other applications that they've integrated with Exostar, or that Exostar is managing and running, or actually it is an Exostar application that customer is utilizing. And then they may integrate that with some of their back-end systems. But the one we're going to talk about in depth, and the one I'm going to actually show you and demonstrate for you, is Exostar supplier management. And again, this is what's gathering information from your suppliers that you can then determine whether or not you want to give them access to applications and whether or not you can work with them on a particular contract. Now, what the supplier management solution allows you to do, it really allows you to onboard suppliers more quickly. Because they've already provided some of this information and you can draw upon that Exostar community, you can get that information back and provide feedback more quickly. If for some reason they update their information, right? They've changed systems, they've added on a new organization, etc. When they update that form, you're going to get notified. So you'll be able to maintain that compliance standard, that compliance posture, if you will, and you'll understand where your partners are at any given time. You could then take that information and use the Exostar integrations to allow you to bring that data from yours into your own customer master data or into your ERP. Really depends on how you want to leverage that information. And then because it is Exostar, and because it's one of the many applications that we manage and host on behalf of our customers, you're always going to be assured that it maintains those same cybersecurity requirements that any application does that is a cloud service provided for the aerospace and defense industry. So with that, let's dive into the application and see how it actually works. So this is Exostar's supplier management module. As you can see, I've sent out a number of forms to organizations that I'm working with. Because I've done that, I can tell whether or not they're compliant or non-compliant. I can filter these on a particular, value. So I currently have 2 organizations that are compliant. If I instead want to look at just non-compliance, I can do that as well. If I see they're non-compliant, it'll give me, their issue. In these cases, they have forms that expired or forms that are expiring shortly. I can then reach out to them and ask them to update that. So I could go into the supplier actions. I can, this is, they're non-compliant. I can, email them something, and I can go ahead and send them an email. So I'm going to send an email to one of the users on the other side. So this is all the current users from this particular supplier. So I'm going to pick which one I want to send it to. I'm going to send them a note. Add a signature block if I want to, and then send that off. This will keep track that I've emailed this particular customer, that we have asked them to update their information. Now, the system is also proactively sending, those reminder emails, both when I send them information that I need them to fill out. When I do that, it comes with a due date, how long they have to fill out that particular information, and the system will send those reminders. Just like this, or just like that, as those things come due, the system is also going to be sending those emails out. It's going to keep track of those different statuses of compliance, non-compliance. Am I compliant with CCRA? Am I compliant with NIST, etc.? Over time, as I onboard my suppliers, I'm going to be able to track the average onboarding time for those. Hopefully, and what you should see is a drop in this over time, because as you leverage the community and as you leverage more capabilities, and as those folks fill out more information, etc., you'll start to see that onboarding time reduce, and you'll be, just have both a more productive supplier base, and you'll reduce some of those disruptions that are caused by non-compliance. Now, there are a few different ways to reach out to those suppliers when you decide you want to work with somebody. So, for example, if I'm a buyer of a particular commodity, and I know that, and I've done my research, and I know there is a new supplier, we'll call it Acme. I can then search the Exostar community, all suppliers of Acme, And this is going to give me a list of all the current Acme companies that are already part of the Exostar network. If the name, the IDs, the DUNS number, the address, etc., matches the one that I've identified, I can simply invite them to start to work with me. To do that, I would simply invite this existing supplier, this Acme Steel. I would add in a user from that organization that I want to send this information to, and I would send them the forms or the information that I need to gather from them. When I send information to them, I can choose an approval process or individuals from my organization that are going to be the approvers of that information as it comes back to me. I could also do this for groups of suppliers. And in that case, we call those campaigns. So when I have maybe 10, maybe 20, etc., suppliers that I want to invite to work with, I can do that as a campaign. I'm going to download a template or a CSV file, an Excel spreadsheet, if you will, of how I need to enter that data into the system. I'm going to, if you will, open this file. I'm going to fill it out. I'm going to save it. I'm going to fill out all this information. I'm then going to upload that. And then it's going to start a campaign. Now, if I look at those campaigns, you'll see that I've uploaded a few of these. As the campaign starts to process, I'm going to resolve issues if the system itself isn't quite sure if an organization is the one that I've identified or it's a new organization. It's going to ask me to resolve that. So if I look at this particular campaign and I say resolve, it's going to show, right? I've got 3 Acme universities here. If I look at the details, it's going to show me all the possible matches for this particular organization. It's going to say that, look, we have a is this a new organization? You know what? We have a 99% confidence that you mean the same organization that's already part of Exostar. So it's not new, right? It is part of this. So I can simply click on this, and that's going to resolve that conflict. And it's going to choose this organization to send that information to and gather that information from. We're then going to start to determine, those organizations that we want to work with based on them returning those forms that were sent to them as part of this invitation process. Those enrollments are going on as these different campaigns, and I'm seeing what, they're currently in this particular state. So I've got 28 campaigns going on with 28 different organizations from those campaigns, and they're currently having forms assigned to them, and they're completing these and sending them back to me. As they get these forms and fill them out, I am getting feedback from them. So I can see that we sent a form to this particular vendor, Supplier SEM1, that they've started on it, that they're 40% through the form, and that when it was sent, it was initiated yesterday on 10/1, and this was the last time it was updated, and this is the person that's currently working on it. And I'm going to get that feedback as they complete. The system itself is also going to be reminding them that they've got this to do. It's due on this particular date, etc. Now, again, if they had already received this from somebody else, then it's going to become pre-populated, and they're just going to have to verify that they've done it. And it's going to go through this process for all of those different suppliers that I've sent information to and that I want to gather information from. it's going to roll it up to me in a nice dashboard where I can see what that status of that particular organization is. Now, as I mentioned, we have a CCRA form, a NIST 800-171. We have a conflict minerals. We have a basic intake form. Now, if you needed additional information, you could create your own forms that you want people to fill out. That's here under form management, under form lifecycle. You'll see all the existing forms that are available. You can clone these existing forms and add additional fields to them. You can create additional forms from scratch, and you can use the form editor or designer to customize this to meet your requirements. You can have different element types that you want to gather information from. Is this free text? Is this text for a phone number, email address, etc.? Are these drop-down boxes, multi-select, single select, etc.? Do I need logic around these different things? And logic is, hey, if you select this value, then display these values, that, etc. So you can create a custom form for your organization or add on to those existing forms. So hopefully that gave you a good idea of the capabilities of Exostar's supplier management module. This allows you to leverage that trusted Exostar network where organizations that have already been vetted, are already working with others, are already starting to share that information, allows you to leverage that community and speed up that process to work more closely and more quickly with the folks that you need to work with. Now, Exostar has a number of solutions across the supply chain. Not only do we have things like supplier management, but as I mentioned before, we're also one of the leaders of providing supply chain portals. If you want a PO collaboration kind of solution for your organization, one where you can engage directly with your suppliers throughout that process of being invoiced, getting POs issued to them, having them invoice you, and provide you delivery, ASN commitments, etc. What we can also do is work with you if you are working with these various supply chain portals. If you've got the need to go to multiple supply chain portals today, or if you're a high volume supplier to an organization that has one of these, and you'd like to automate that process of gathering order information, of gathering demand information, of providing that feedback directly to those, Exostar has a solution. If you go to our website and look up for demand line, that solution allows you to automate that process. It allows you to schedule when you want to gather that information from the different supply chain portals out there. It's going to normalize that data. It's going to bring it into the demand line instance. We can integrate that directly with your ERP so you can get those feeds directly, automate and ease that process to save your organization time and money rather than doing these manually, updating spreadsheets, then manually entering that into your ERP, etc. So everybody, I want to thank you for your time and attention today. I didn't see any questions come over chat, but if you do, and you're just not comfortable making them now, please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to answer those questions. Thanks again for coming today. Hope you have a great day and a great rest of the week. Thanks again.